I'm a free speech absolutist, but I'm wrestling with pro pedophile movement. I don't know what to do because I truly hate them and I don't want them to be able to speak, but I don't know how to handle this because there's now this LGBTQAI is looking at P now, and it's these people that are claiming non acting pedophiles should be a protected group now, and I don't want them to be able to talk, but I also I'm a free speech guy, and I really need some guidance on this.
Yeah, God, well, that's a tough one, man. I don't know what to say about that. I'd have to think about it for a good while. I mean, let's think about free speech absolutism for a minute. I mean, there's always been some legal restrictions on what you can say, right? You can't incite a crime. And I think that English common law and the variants that have existed in the US have done a pretty good job of putting the proper restrictions on speech, so you can't incite crime.
Yeah, totally.
We didn't need all these. The hate crime issue, that's a complete catastrophe because you run into the problem of who's going to define hate, and the answer to that is people who don't have anything better to do, and those are the people who are the last people that you want to have define hate.
Did you see my sketch with Crowder with that? Where
I haven't seen it.
Oh, we're in court. And I just keep saying, he hate crimed me, Your Honor, and I'm pretending to be gay so he goes to jail longer. It's pretty funny. But anyway, go on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the question is, what the hell is it that a non-practicing pedophile would want to say? You know, I read an article a while back by someone like that who said that they couldn't help the fact that they were sexually attracted to children, but they never acted on it. And I would say, well, that's the limit, right? Is the action. That's where it becomes illegal. You can't completely govern the contents of your fantasies. Although I think you can also play a devil's game with them. You know, that's what people like Ted Bundy did. I don't know if you remember Ted Bundy, the law student who killed so many women. I mean, he had pretty pathological fantasies involving violence, and he indulged them. You can certainly indulge your fantasies and make them grow, you know. So, but I guess what I'm wondering about with regards to your question is, what is it that you feel the limits should be?
See, me and my wife disagree on this I hear what I'm saying, and it sounds like I want to prosecute thought crime, which is crazy. But if someone says, you know, I do not want that because that's a legal precedent that the government will never give back. So I don't want them to have that. But when someone says, I am a pedophile, I am aroused by children, and I have the right to be a member of society if I don't assault children. And you said, and that to me is just like, it pushes my limit of what I believe. You know, I just don't. Yeah, well, I want them to fear.
There's going to be situations where your principles are tested.
Yeah.
There's always going to be those border conditions because one principle can't govern everything. You need a bunch of principles, and maybe there has to be a superordinate principle, like honesty is a good one, I would say, as a superordinate principle. But it doesn't matter what principles you adopt. There's going to be limit cases, always. And that doesn't invalidate the principle. I mean, abortion is a good example of that. There's just no way around fighting about that, because you have two principles at stake, right? It's pretty obvious that you should have control over your own body. But then if you're a mother, if you're pregnant, the question is, well, exactly to what degree is that only your body? And you might say, look, let's say you're an absolutist with regards to the right to choose. But like I've talked to social workers, here's a good example. So this happens quite frequently. I've talked to social workers who are pretty radically left about abortion and about the fact that the unborn children have no real legal status. It's like, okay, let's say that you're an addict, and maybe you're addicted to heroin and cocaine and alcohol, because most people who are addicted to heroin and cocaine are also addicted to alcohol. And let's say that you can't stay away from alcohol while you're pregnant, and so you have a child with fetal alcohol syndrome, which is a real catastrophe, right? Fetal alcohol syndrome, no one recovers from that. It's permanent. And it involves mental retardation and all sorts. I mean, it can be mild, but it can be very severe. Well, so fine. So you're still addicted, and Child Welfare Services comes in and takes away your child, and so now there's someone with fetal alcohol syndrome in the world. Then you do it again. 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 It's like you produce 7 kids with fetal alcohol syndrome. It's like those kids, those people, when they were fetal, had no rights. It's okay to do that. You can poison people before they're born, and that's okay. It's like, well, I'm not saying that that's an argument against a woman's right to choose, but it certainly indicates just how complex the situation is. And another example is preferential abortion of girls, which is happening like mad in places like China and India. It happens in Canada and the US too, mostly among people from those cultural backgrounds, other cultural backgrounds too. So is that okay? And if it's not okay, it's okay to kill, it's okay to abort fetuses randomly. But if you do it with intent, then that's wrong. It's like, okay, I get your point and all that, but that's not an easy moral case to make. Yeah. So there's all these limit conditions that we have to argue about, and pedophilia is a good example, because your claim is, look, there's some things you don't even get to fantasize about.
Yeah. You should, like people should be scared of the men in their community when they say things like that. Like you can't say you're aroused by my kid, or I want to kill you. You know what I mean? Right. And I don't know how else to verbalize that. It's like, I want you dead. And it's like, it just blows my mind that that's now starting to become a thing. Like when they started going after the kids, like the trans kid thing, it like broke my heart, because I see my son.
The trans kid thing is, there's one kid, and I don't remember his name, who's been put forward recently as a sort of a model. He's about 8 years old, and he's become the drag model, essentially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's me and the Bears are doing a video right now. We do these parodies called "It's Time." Like one's called "It's Time to Submit to Tolerance." Like it's these ironic PSAs, and we're doing one called "It's Time to Take the Rainbow Back." And it's pretty funny. So we're working on that right now. And when I was trying to get pictures for it, there's some crazy stuff going on right now.
We're also at a limit case there, I think, to some degree. So maybe it's something like this. If we can pull back a little bit from the proclivity to become personally involved in these things. It really is easy to become personally involved, because you get outraged about certain things. I was outraged about what happened with Bill C-16. I still am, about what happened with Bill C-16 in Canada. I think it's absolutely unforgivable. But let's pull back a little bit. What seems to have happened, I think, with the LGBT movement, so to speak, is that they pretty much won all their victories. But the machine hasn't gone away. This activist machine was built up over, well, let's say since the beginning of the civil rights movement. And it involves millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, certainly, and likely millions of people, and as real activists. And, well, as far as I can tell, they've won all their victories. But what's going to happen? But there's a machine in place. There's a whole activist bureaucracy. It's like, well, what the hell is it going to do? Just dry up and blow away? Well, no, it can't. So it looks for the next cause, and the causes are starting to get pretty damn tenuous. Yeah. But it isn't obvious what to do about that, except to say that. It's like, look, guys, you won. You won already. So back the hell off, because now you're more harm than good.
Yeah, it's an outrage Ponzi scheme. It just has to expand. It's kind of like when the Red Sox first won, they didn't know what to do. They were like, "Do we still burn the city down?" Like they're so used to losing.
Right. Yeah, right, exactly.
I read the Gulag Archipelago because I had to know what you were talking about in all those lectures, and you were right, man. It was intense. It was a painful read, but it was very necessary. And part of it is saving these people from themselves, because once that equation is in place, it eats itself. So now I see
eats itself first.
I know, and the weakness of some of the generals of these, like one wave's generals are the next wave's prisoners, and there is no human element to any of this, and they have to. That's why I can't imagine being just a normal gay person and watching this alphabet of Satan just expand. And back then they just didn't want it to be illegal to be gay. That's a very valid request. And now they're starting to try and normalize pedophilia. Like, can you imagine being in the group that's
I think about 1 in 5 gay people now vote Republican.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, right, exactly. So you see how things are starting to shift. And my friends and I who've been talking about this sort of thing in detail figure the first people to get kicked out of the activist left are going to be the gay men.
And the Jews, and Jews too. Jews are already gone.
Yeah, well, Asians also. Those Asians, they're very pesky because they keep overachieving.
Yeah, pesky. They come here with a mat and $9, and in 10 years they have 3 laundromats. That doesn't fit our equation.
Right, exactly. That's no way for a properly oppressed person to behave.
It's a new mythology. It's a mythology with no God. And as much as the conservative Christians would annoy me in the 80s with their do as I say, not as I do. And I was raised Christian, and then I went agnostic for a while, and then I had a kid, and I prayed so hard I couldn't turn back from it. And then you helped me make a lot of connections back into just a good, rational faith that I can have in my adulthood and pass to my children. But like, at least they were trying to shame people to do something better. You know, it's
you see, that's something that I think that the new atheists really have on their conscience. It's like, one thing, I don't care what you say about traditional religion, at least once a week for an hour, everybody thought about trying to do some good with their life.
Exactly.
Even if they did it hypocritically, for Christ's sake. At least there was the idea that there was something good and that maybe you weren't it, and that you could be trying a little harder. And the cynics used to say, well, you go to church and you say you're going to be good for an hour, and then you go back to your old shenanigans. But maybe that was better than never thinking about it, even for an hour.
Exactly. And they're like, and it would just be like a funny joke. Like, the best way to make sure a Baptist doesn't drink all your beer when you fish with him is bring 2 of them. Like, but it's a funny joke. Now it's like people are shaming you into thinking an 8-month abortion is good. I loved how you described abortion, that you can't argue it's good. It's like,
right.
The adult conversation is it a personal issue that should be legislated by the family or by law? Because I'm libertarian when it comes to government, but I have more conservative values, and that's the adult conversation. The adult conversation is not, is it good? It's like, who thinks it's good? And like the way you described it, where it was like, would you ever recommend a woman you love have an abortion? It's like, maybe in certain extreme situations, someone could make that argument. But like, one of the reasons my opinion shifted on abortion pretty drastically is seeing my wife get pregnant and seeing just how special and that is, and just the value of it, and just how incredible human life is, and to act like you can just rip it out of someone with no consequences. It's just, it's tragic to like, and the victims are the women that get fed all this this BS that like they're going to have an abortion, and then Lena Dunham is going to give them some award for female empowerment, and then they have to go back to work for 90 hours a week until they die. It's like, that sounds like hell.
Well, you know, it would be really nice if we had enough sense as a society to actually have a serious conversation about sex. Because we can't. I like to think that we live in the delusions of a 13-year-old girl. It seems to me right. Because all of this noise that's occurred in the press in the last year about sexual misbehavior on the part of, let's call them hypothetically powerful men, is a reflection of something that's deeper that we can't even talk about, which is, you saw this with the Aziz Ansari thing. It's like, so this girl who went out with him was obviously not very happy with his behavior, and who knows, like maybe he's not the world's most sophisticated seducer. It's certainly possible. I mean, who the hell is? But you might think that oral sex implies consent. Well, you know, Jesus, at some point there's no such thing as implication anymore. And then she also seemed to think that it was okay to provide details of the most private, intimate details of her personal life, and that was just okay somehow. And, you know, I mean, wouldn't it be nice to be able to sit down and have a conversation and say, okay, look, here's a good guideline. How about you don't have sex on the first date?
Right.
It's just a stupid idea, okay? You don't know the person, and it's dangerous, and sex is entangled with emotion, and it's probably somewhat demeaning because you don't know each other. It's an intimate experience. You're just going to give that away and treat it as if it's only impulsive pleasure. Okay, how about not the first date? That's just a bad idea, whether you're male or female. Now, okay, well, then we could think, well, here's another guideline. How about you don't do anything with anyone that you wouldn't talk to them about? That's a good one. I like that as a psychological maxim. It's like, if you can't talk to your new girlfriend about sex, then you shouldn't be having sex with her, because your relationship, the intimacy of your relationship psychologically doesn't match the intimacy of your relationship physically. So you've put the cart before the horse. And the reason you shouldn't do it is because no good is going to come of it. You'll have sex and there'll be the short-term pleasure that's associated with that, which isn't trivial. I'm not trying to trivialize it, but there's no medium to long-term, there's nothing medium to long-term positive in it.
Yeah, so, but it's also like speech. You got to let people make a mistake sometimes to learn that. Like, I had sex with enough people to learn that monogamy is way better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so why did you decide that? Why did you decide it was better?
Because, one of the first jokes that Adam Sandler first saw me do that had him put me in a movie was, I was like, because I would get a lot of female attention because I'm doing stand-up and I'm playing piano and all that. But because of the way my family raised me, my parents had only been with each other and they're still married. And I didn't really have any inoculation to that world of just female attention. And and I didn't lose my virginity till I was in college because, piano and being funny isn't exactly sexy in high school. And so, I did this joke where I'm like, I almost lust love, like relationships, or I'll be like, I could sleep with a woman and the next morning she could be like, what do you want to do for breakfast? And I'm like, what do you want to do for Christmas? Where I almost, where my psyche was trying to almost latch on to like what I wanted was that. And what I kept getting offered was just sex. And like, I've complained about that to guys who are like, must be nice. And I'm like, you don't understand. It's so much better with one person, because with a lot of people, you're just reliving the first act of every movie. Like Forrest Gump hasn't even met Jenny yet, Yeah,
I think you put your finger on something right there. Is that, I was talking to a comedian again a couple of weeks ago, and he told me this story about he'd been off to Las Vegas with some pro athlete, and the athlete was at a party, and this woman came up with a bunch of other women and sort of paraded them in front of him. And the idea was, and this comedian said this sort of thing was far from rare, was that he could just have his pick, right? That was the whole idea of the show. He could just have his pick. And that was happening to him pretty regularly. And I think your objection to that, which is, well, it's like the first act of the movie over and over again, I think is exactly right. And it's also, guys who would say, well, I have no opportunity for sex whatsoever, and that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I would say, yeah, it certainly beats the hell out of having no opportunity at all. But to think that an endless oversupply of women, let's say, is somehow works, means that you also have to believe that sex can completely be divorced from friendship and intimacy and family and your past and culture and all of that. And I think that's a adolescent delusion. I think it's a pathway to perdition. I don't believe that that's how life is. And then another thing you said that I thought was really interesting, which is, I think, something that women don't appreciate about many men, or many women don't appreciate about many men, is that there's actually a fairly powerful desire for most men to have a relationship.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's like, but sometimes I think people don't understand meaninglessness until they know meaning, because we think in contrasts. I think that now that I have Amy and we've been together for years now and we have a family, looking back, I pity not even knowing that was possible. And I just think that's ancient knowledge, man. Ancient knowledge. It's like people were right. It's like we keep trying to reinvent everything.
People were right.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, look, when I was starting my career in Boston, I went down to Boston in 1993, and it was my first full-time job. And my wife, we just had my first child, Michaela. She was about a year and a half old when we went down there. I think that's right, something like that. And my wife was pregnant with Julian. And I had a pretty good career going. I had a good academic position, and it was very grueling and demanding, and I had to work extra hours because the salary was very low, and my wife didn't have a working visa for the United States. But I was so goddamn happy to come home. I could hardly stand it.
Yeah.
It was a place to relax. We had our fights and we sorted them out, but it was great to come home to the kids because they were so damn happy to see me. It was just painful. And like, I kept thinking, God, people aren't told about this. It's like, this is, and there was a study just finished. It was the Harvard longitudinal study of men, started in 1937. So the men are in their 90s now. It's the longest longitudinal study that's ever been done on human development. It was pretty clear from that study that these men, who were pretty high achieving men, if the analysts, if the scientists looked at what predicted the quality of their life across time and also longevity, it was relationships. It was intensity and intimacy within relationships. And if you have any sense, you notice that. And all of that's so downplayed in our culture, the value of having children and the bond you have with them, that's so important to you, especially as you get older, and the utility of having someone alongside you to share your life with and to communicate with them. It's like we've forgotten this or devalued. It's all bloody. It's like we're still, like I said, we're 13-year-old girls from like 1967, something like that.